What's up, guys? So I've been getting a lot of questions on my turbocharged Jeep that I just finished building. It's a 2005 Jeep Wrangler TJ with the 2.4 liter PowerTech, which actually makes no power, as we know. So it's been kind of a goal of mine to turbocharge this thing, considering that the engine in this is very similar to the 2.4 liter in the SRT4, the Neon, which is a turbocharged motor. So I've been kind of planning it out, collecting parts over the last year, and I finally did it, and it's pretty awesome. So I figured I'd do a walkthrough of what I did and show you guys how I did it. So some of you guys may be on the Jeep forums. I've been posting a few pictures as I've went of what exactly I've been doing. So this will help answer any questions and kind of give you a better visual of what's going on. So I guess where I started out was I rebuilt the motor a year ago due to a thrust bearing issue that every time it was pushing the front main seal out right there behind the harmonic balancer. Because of a worn thrust bearing, so every time I pushed the clutch and you could actually see the crank walk back and forth. So it's got a fresh bottom end. It's got 175,000 miles on it. Doesn't burn a drop of oil. Very healthy motor. Like I said, it's got a new bottom end. And here's the newest addition. This is a T28, a CX Racing turbo that I made work on my Jeep. So I made a full custom stainless Schedule 10 manifold, turbo manifold, to a T28 flange onto this CX Racing turbo. I tapped into the oil feed line, or the oil pressure sensor that's down there on the block, and teed off of that fitting. So I used a 3/8 MPT threaded T, tapped into the block. The hole's already there. Threaded that into a 3/8 MPT to 4An fitting, the little black aluminum fitting, going to a 4N braided line. As you can see, the oil pressure sensor is still there with the purple wire going into it. So to make this work, to actually get the T threaded in there, due to the casting on the block, I actually had to modify the engine mount and cut the top bracket off, and then add a support in the middle there to keep the structural integrity of the mount, but get enough clearance to get the line on. So that comes up into the top of the turbo. For coolant, I used 5/8 lines that tap into the 5/8 lines that are already existing into the heater core. So one of the things, like, I did a lot of R&D on this, as you can tell. Maybe if you guys want to do the same thing, and this video will help you out. But the lines that actually go into the heater core, there's a conception that they're different sizes, but the actual reality is that the fittings that are on the heater core are 3/4 inch and 5/8, but they still use a 5/8 hose. So this is just a little stretched out in order to get it over the heater core. So those are two PEX. They're actually, I think they're 3/4 inch, but they're actually in reality 5/8 wide T's that I used 5/8 heater core lines to feed the turbo. So for the oil drain, what I had to do was actually pull the oil pan off and weld in a 10An bung into the oil pan. It's welded from the inside. That way I can bring my oil drain from the turbo with a 90-degree 10N fitting, so I could drain back into the oil pan. So for this, the oil sits relatively high in this pan. I don't know if you can tell the way it sloops back, but you want to go as high as possible when you put the drain back in. That way you're not draining into the oil and it back feeds and you blow your seals on your turbo. So that's what I did for that. For the intercooler setup, I used a 28-inch by 10-inch high by 2-inch core, I believe, which I had off a old DSM, an old build that I did. So I just recycled it, but it happened to be the perfect size to fit where I wanted it to go. So what I had to do to make it work was move the radiator backwards and make brackets to put it behind the intercooler, but I couldn't just keep it straight up and down, so I had to tilt it about 10 or 15 degrees in order for the axle to still have clearance and the steering stabilizer, so it wouldn't whack the radiator if I did any crazy articulation with the suspension. So it's tilted back just a hair. That meant I didn't have to modify the lower radiator hose. I could leave it the same length. And the top one still fits, but I think I'm going to shorten it a couple inches so this sits kind of the factory route rather than being all bent up like that. But there's no issues flowing. It's not kinked or anything, so it all works in that sense. So then I made the intercooler piping. That's after the intercooler, and then the charge side out of 2.5-inch regular aluminum piping. So because our Jeeps are speed density, there's no MAF sensor obviously, but we do have an air temperature sensor. To make this work, I had to weld on a 3/8 bung to a threaded sensor. Our original sensor actually gets pushed into the boot on the airbox on the stock setup, so I couldn't make that work with an aluminum pipe, so I actually found a Dodge Avenger sensor. I'll put the link to the forum, it'll give you all the parts numbers, but I found a Dodge Avenger air temperature sensor, which actually has a brass threaded part to it, and I just had to modify the inside of the plug, and again on the forum you'll see where I dremeled it out, but that allowed me to slip this over and it worked just the same. And I had to extend the wiring a little bit, a couple inches as well, but yeah, so the screen right now is just because I didn't have an air filter, so I just put it on there to show you guys and do a little testing, but that's coming today. So as far as fuel management goes, this is the biggest argument on the forum. So there's one guy that I saw on the forum that, or a couple of guys that have done this before, but they use the SRT4 or the PT Cruiser manifold with the turbo, and what they did they left a completely stock ECU and upped the injector size, and it seems to be working out for them, but I wasn't going to risk it that way, so I actually ended up getting a split-second enricher, it's called. So what this does is it taps into your primary O2 sensor, which reads your air fuel and gets back to the ECU. So what this does is it intercepts the signal from your O2 sensor and modifies the voltage so that your factory computer thinks it's running lean and adds more fuel under boost. So it's boost activated. So when it runs completely stock out of boost, you get the factory mapping in the closed loop, and then as soon as it goes into positive pressure, the enricher kicks on and makes the computer think it's running lean and adds more fuel. So that just takes a little tuning. There's a bunch of dials inside. I'll probably make a different video on how to set this up, but let me tell you, it works phenomenal, because I did a lot of testing with this before I actually bolted the whole turbo kit on, and I found that these things basically run in closed loop a majority of the time, which means that it uses the O2 sensor to manage the air fuel, how much fuel it puts in the engine. So I only saw it go into open loop one time when I was on the highway, full throttle for about 10 seconds and went into open loop. I'll probably do a different video on open loop, closed loop, but basically what it means is it uses your O2 sensor to manage the air fuel. So using the enricher allowed me to modify that signal and give me a proper air fuel ratio. So I'm not in risk of detonation or shooting a rod through the block, so that's pretty good. I'm also running 93 octane fuel, obviously, to prevent detonation, because I couldn't modify, I couldn't set the timing, I couldn't retard the timing, obviously. But again, the enricher is doing a phenomenal job. At 5 pounds of boost, where I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to go any higher for now. So walk you into the inside now. So inside, I've got my little A-pillar gauge pod with my wideband gauge and my boost gauge. This is an AEM wideband. I pretty much only trust these. A little expensive, but they've never let me down. And this is a cheap glow shift boost gauge, which works fine. So that's with them on. So I'll go ahead and start it for you. So as you can see, there's no check engine lights on, which is pretty amazing. When I first did this, I expected to get a high voltage map sensor code or something along those lines, because we only have a 1-bar map sensor which only goes up to 0 psi, so it doesn't account for positive pressure. So I was expecting that to come up as a code, but so far so good. So I did a full custom downpipe, you can see, and then used the heat wrap. The two bungs there are for my O2 sensor wideband, and the downpipe comes down from the turbo to a flex joint. So I made all this to V-band to a Jones resonator. The secondary O2 sensor, because I didn't want a cat, I actually used this elbow, and that elbow has a little restrictor in it that allows for the O2 sensor to kind of have the exhaust stream, so it thinks the cat is still there and kind of tricks the ECU. So I haven't thrown a light for no cat yet, but we'll see when I get more miles on it. Thing, and then I'll eventually put them off around it and run it out the back. But for now, I've just been worried about tuning it, and but so far so good. I've had 0 leaks. All the lines are good. 0 issues. No breaking up. No engine lights. So let's take it for a spin. All right, so we're in the Jeep now. So I'll show you guys what's going on exactly with the tuning and all that stuff and what this thing sounds like. So like I said, these things are in closed loop almost like 99% of the time. So again, that uses the O2 sensor to keep it at a perfect 14.7. So as you can see, when it's idling now, they're flashing like that in the video, but they don't do that in real life. I don't know why it does that. Something with the shutter speed on the camera or something. But it's right now the computer's going to do is try to fight and keep it at 14.7, the air-fuel ratio. That's perfect, lambda, whatever you want to call it. So it's going to do that in every naturally aspirated car. It's going to try to keep it there unless you're going into open loop, which means you're full throttle or heavy load, blah, blah, blah. But in our case with the 2.4, it stays in closed loop almost all the time. But you don't want it, when you get into boost, to stay at 14.7, because you want a little more extra fuel to prevent detonation, and, you know, so you want it around 12.5 in that area under boost. So again, there's the boost gauge. So again, no check engine lights. I've had no cooling issues. Oil pressure's good. No problems whatsoever. Again, this has the 6-speed. So I'll take you guys for a little spin. I came to the open parking lot, so I'm not filming and driving stick and boosting at the same time. So we'll go for a little ride. So as you can see, anything outside of boost is going to stay around 14.7. So that's third gear. So we're out of boost. And we're at 14.7. So what the enricher does is, so as soon as we hit You can set it to when it comes on, but I set it for about almost exactly 0. So once it transitions from negative pressure to positive pressure, then it'll boost and it'll add the extra fuel. So as we'll see, we'll do a little pull right now. So as you can see, we didn't get the full boost right there. So I have it set at 5 PSI right now. It kind of peaks out at 5 PSI, which gives it excellent power, but it's still kind of on the lower end for now. And I have it set so it adds a little bit more fuel to be on the safe side. So you probably see it dip around 11 in there. But again, we'll go through the gears. So this is first gear. Second. Third. So you hear the turbo flutter, it's just an awesome noise, but I mean, as you can see, it works phenomenal. I mean, it gives it just exactly what I was looking for. That little bit of extra pep to keep it drivable on the highway, and still does it safely. That enricher works excellent. As soon as I get in a boost, it brings me right down to where I want to be as far as air fuel goes. I mean, it's just an awesome setup. If you have any more questions, just let me know in the comments. This is my first YouTube video, so let me know how I did. And check out the forum and answer on there. I'll answer any questions. Hopefully I see a few more of you guys do this, because this Jeep was almost made to do it. So I'll keep you guys updated. Thanks for watching.